So what I mean to say is, as we started moving from uh, an individual to the family, from family to the so-called society or the so-called village, from village to Janapadas, from Janapadas to Mahajanapadas, as we started slowly moving from here to here, first, the initial time we used to protect our lives. Security of life was our main goal. Security of life was main goal, right? But slowly, along with security of life, that is right to life, they also started now looking at the property of the people. Now, the king's role was increased to not only secure the life of the people but also to protect the areas that they are having. So, right to protect the property has increased. The king's role has now expanded. Not only his council has expanded, but his function has also been expanded. The earlier function of the king is to secure life of the people, to secure that there is law and order here. How you can secure life of the people by ensuring that no one is quarreling with each other. As a result, the initial function of these fellows are law and order. But as we have slowly moved, right, not only securing life of the people, of course, securing life of people is even important in all these spheres also. Law and order has to be present even here, even here, right? Law and order is a basic concept which was present not only at that point of time, even today, law and order is important. That is the first duty. What is mean by law and order? You protect or secure the life of the people, and that is the reason why you are installed. Now, slowly, their property or their role has increased from not only protecting the life, but protecting the property and protecting the liberties of the people, right? So, right to life, right to property, right to the so-called liberties, and now even in these villages they started their function called you also protect the poor and the vulnerable. How you can protect by ensuring something called giving some additional resources to these poor and vulnerable who cannot survive in the game of might is right. So slowly, the functions of the empire or the functions of the king has started to be not only law and order but also providing welfare measures to the people. This is how the concept of the so-called government or governance has evolved. Now, law and order, welfare measures has evolved, right? Now look at the structure that is in red ink and that is in blue ink, right? The structure which is present on the top is known as government. The structure which is present on the top is known as government. This is called government structure. Why it is called government? Because it is the structure which says that who are the members who are playing here or who is there to protect the lives of the people. This is citizens, and in order to protect them, whatever the structure that is available on the top, that is called government. So from this explanation itself, you might have understood what is government. Government is the structure to ensure that they are performing some works. What are those works that they are performing? Law and order and welfare. The works that this structure performs is known as governance. What is the difference between government and governance? Government is the structure, governance is the function that this government has to do. What is that function? Earlier it was law and order, now law and order has increased. So, governance, that is what I said. Governance is establishing law and order, but this concept is evolving. It is not limited to law and order today, it is evolving. How it is evolving? It is including welfareistic measures. It is including welfareistic measures. This is called governance in the country. So government is the top thing which is with the red color. Why government is there? It is an association which is having legitimacy by whom? By the people themselves. People themselves has given this legitimacy to them. Hence this is called government structure. It is there to do some functions for the welfare of citizens, and that functions are law and order and welfare, and that functions in turn are called as governance. So government is a structure, and whatever government does is known as governance, right? Hence, we always discuss this also. Maximum government, minimum government, maximum governance. Minimum government, maximum governance. This is the theme of Narendra Modi. What do you mean by minimum government? Look at the red structure. Minimize it as it is as possible. Don't expand it. Minimize it. By minimizing it, he wanted to ensure maximum governance. Maximum governance is minimize this structure but maximize this structure. That is what his concept is. Minimum government, maximum governance. Now look at this. As we have moved on from village to Janapadas, Janapadas to Mahajanapadas to empire, the dimensions of or the needs of the people started changing. Earlier it was just protection of life, now protection of property, protection of rights, now protection of something called vulnerable sections, that is called welfareistic measures. So the needs of the people started changing. So in order to ensure that the needs of the people are met, the government started, because the needs, not only the strength of the people were increased, but also the needs of the people increased. Hence, government structure increased. Slowly, the government is limited. As a result, non-governments also started ensuring or coming in. Along with government, they used to come non-governments in that structure, such as self-help groups, NGOs, and civil societies, right? They started occupying the role or uh, giving supplementary support to the government institutions. Hence, NGOs, self-help groups, they are also a part of the government structures, but they are non-government structures because it is not having legitimacy. That is the only difference. But still, they do perform the same function that is called governance to these organizations. They are supplementary to provide governance, supplementary to the government. This is how the concept of the so-called government has evolved. But the basics to understand what is government, what is governance, what is citizens, why it was evolved, that is how you have to understand. So what started at one place with a king, council has evolved. Now as we have moved to the modern era, kings were replaced by democratic governments. That is called today there is a regular process of replacing the so-called kings. We call them as the representatives of the people, but more or less the structure is again the same thing, right? Democratic government is where people will be replacing the ruler often if they are not satisfied with the rule. After every 5 years in India, you will be replacing him, right? So this is called government, this is called governance. Now the entire thing is visible. Now government is visible. Now look at this. Government is the instrument through which the state performs its action. Now state is something which is invisible, like the soul of the human body. Now the body is visible because you can see who is the fellow, who is at the top, who is at the bottom, who is at the middle. So government is visible. It is the instrument, or state uses government as an instrument to perform its actions, that is called governance. So this is how it is linked, and this is how NGOs, self-help groups, civil societies differ in themselves, right? So what I mean to say is, so I was saying about what is politics, city-state. What is state? State is an instrumentality, or a state is something which is abstract in its nature, and government is something which is real in nature. We can see that in nature. However, government is the instrument for the state to perform its actions, right? What is the action of the government? The action of the government is to govern, or governance, right? As per Plato, how it is going to have good governance. As per Aristotle, how it is going to have good governance. And what is it only the government? But you do not. You also have civil societies like NGOs, self-help groups, which are working. But the only difference is government authority is unlimited because it has authority. As a result, the governance that the state can do, it is unlimited. Whereas your NGOs governance can be limited. They can be restricted only for welfare functions, not law and order functions. As a result, you have this thing called governmental governance, right? What is political science now? Now try to understand this. When I was discussing about what is political science, I said political science is rotating around the concept of state, right? Political science begins with the state, it ends with the state. Now, what is the state? Whatever you are seeing on that white board, that is called state. Everything, whoever are the members there, trying to understand these relations is called political science. And that I discussed what is political science, what is political theory, right? I discussed there what is political science. Political science has evolved its discipline from the concept of state, because state is the major dimension that we'll study under political science. That is what the concept is. So this is what Western political thought. Western political thought. I said what is Western, what is political. The debate that I had so far is discussing about the so-called uh, political. Now, what is thought? The next concept is what is thought, right? You have to understand this also. What is thought at all, right? What is thought? Alochana, right? What do you mean by thought? Western political. Political, I hope you do understood now. Political, whatever the context that I have discussed so far, this is about political, right? All this is about political. Now the thing is, what is thought at all? In the discipline of political science, political thought is, in the discipline of political science, political thought represents thinking of an age. Thinking of an age. What is thought? In political science, thought is something known as thinking of an age. What do I mean by thinking of an age? It means trying to understand. Trying to understand means trying to understand about the way of thinking. Try to understand. Trying to understand broad way of thinking. Broad way of thinking. Taking, in order to understand broad way of thinking of that age, taking the representation of a scholar of that age, scholar of that age. So in short, what we are doing in thought is we are trying to understand the way of thinking of people at that point of time. We are trying to understand what we do here now, sitting here, right? What we do, we are trying to understand how the way of thinking of people was present at that point of time. The way of thinking of people at that point of time. No. So thought can be called as it is an idea with reference to space and with reference to space and time. What do I mean with reference to space and time? Have an idea now. If you have watched some old Telugu movies or old movies like India movies or ANR movies, right? When you watch them, right, by going through that film, you'll understand that how the society was there at that point of time. Subconsciously, you'll be seeing in the entire black and white movie, you'll be understanding, okay, how people used to think at that point of time, and then we will be starting comparing how that system was present that at that point of time and now. So we try to understand in films, particularly the old movies, what we will do if you are watching some movie of NTR, right? Senior NTR. we will understand how the society was present at that point of time, how the society is present now. So we try to, through that film, we try to understand the thinking of the people of that time. So thought is the same thing. Thought is nothing but thinking of an age. Thought is thinking of an age. In this, what you are trying to think, we are thinking about a particular period in a particular space. For example, thought is nothing but an idea with reference to space and time. For example, Greek political thought. What do you mean by Greek political thought? We are understanding the people's thought of the Greek, that is called a space called Greek, an area called Greek. In which time? Ancient Greek political thought. In the ancient times, how the Greek people used to have or how to understand, how they used to see the nature. So we used to see that concepts. This is called the thought concept. So what is the point that I wanted to say is thought is thinking of an age. This is trying to understand the people of that time. How you'll understand? You should have something like movie. How you understand Indian society in the 1960s or 1970s. If you want to understand that, you'll at least look at a movie or you read the books, right? Now, what is the movie that is present here? How to understand that? The movies are not present from ancient times. As a result, we will take a famous fellow at that point of time who has written some books or who has studied and who has incorporated that here. Through a scholar, we try to understand that age. Through a scholar, we try to understand that age. We try to understand the way of thinking of the people through a scholar, because this scholar has written or this scholar has given the directions how the people used to think at that point of time, right? At that point of time, how people used to think through this scholar. And who are those scholars? Those scholars belong to either India or they belong to the Western world. So as here we are studying about those scholars which are present from the West, so we are trying to understand the people of the West through these thinkers, through these scholars or thinkers. Right, this is known as thought, Western political thought. So Western means the people who are located in the West. We are trying to understand the Western phenomena, our Western people. Try to understand this. We are trying to understand uh, the way of life of the people who are present at that point of time in the West, either that may be Greek, Athens, or anything. How you are going to study about that person through the lens of this scholar. The scholar has given this, or the thinker has studied them at that point of time. By taking that scholar of that age, we are trying to understand the things. Right? Just like by watching the movies, we try to understand 1960s, 1970s India. Similarly, here the cinema will be the scholar, right? Now, to which space the scholar belong? If he is belonging to the space of India, then you call it as Indian political thought. If he is belonging to Western, you call him as Western political thought. So try to understand. So thinking of an age. Thought is thinking of an age. We are trying to understand how people used to think in a particular age or particular time period. We are trying to understand how people used to think, thinking of an age, how they used to think at that age, right? How we are thinking through the scholar's lens. So, thought is nothing but it is an idea about people, how they used to think, with reference to space and time, with reference to a particular geographical area, space, that is Greek, time, which period of time, ancient, medieval, modern, right? That is called time. This is called Western political thought. Now, why I said this thing is, now look at this. Whenever I say Western political thought, they are thinking of age of the people who are located in the West. Now look at all the theories that we have said. In while I was saying about the syllabus that is present here, I clearly said that there is some connection. Look at Western political thoughts give the concept of ideologies like capitalism, the ideology of liberalism, the idea of realism, the idea of the so-called Marxism, socialism. So these concepts has evolved by the thinkers of that time. Who are those thinkers? These thinkers are the Western thinkers. Have that in mind, whatever that we have studied. Now, through them only, the concepts like democracy has come, power has come, the concept of rights has come, right? The concepts of other things like gender equality has come, justice has come. So, what do I mean to say here is in the Western political thought, we are studying about some scholars. Through these scholars, we try to understand the so called the then people, how they think, how they live, how they present. This is called thought, right? We are trying to understand the people of that particular period. And how we are trying to understand, because we cannot have a look at the people, but rather we can have a look at the scholars, because scholars have studied that people and they have incorporated in the books. Through their books we are going to understand that. Now these scholars belong to certain space called Western world. As a result, these scholars has proposed their own theories, or the so-called they have given their own concepts. By understanding that concepts, we try to understand the people of that time. So through these concepts, I said that we have linked this to syllabus, and I said that through thinkers, we understand ideologies. What is that ideology? Thinkers like idealism, propounded by Plato, Aristotle, realism, propounded by Machiavelli, Kautilya, liberalism, propounded by Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, J.S. Mill, right? Then Marxism, proposed by Karl Marx, as a result to the capitalism which is evolved after liberalism, or the concept of this thing. So Marxism, from Marxism again, socialism has evolved, communism has evolved, Leninism has evolved, and then uh, fascism has evolved. Right, all these things started evolving over a period of time. How? With these thinkers itself. Who are those thinkers? They are the Western thinkers, right? Now they have also given through these concepts. They have given some concepts called concept of power, the concept of state. What does the state mean? How the state is going to be good state. From that, they have also discussed about power. They have discussed about in this power who is having the authority. Authority is through legitimacy, and then they have given the concepts of hegemon, and through power, if it is the people who is having that power, then they have said that it is democracy. If the people is having that power, then that is called democracy. And then they have explained about the tenets of democracy, saying that equality, justice, equality, justice, democracy, power, state, right? So they started seeing about rights, everything they started propounding. Now look at these concepts. Look at these concepts, entire section A concepts. Now these are some philosophies which has been emerged out of the thoughts of the so-called scholars of the West. Right? Now we are trying to understand the way of life of the people of that space that is called Greece, or the so-called Western people. Now where are the Eastern people here? If you are studying about political thought, I said it is understanding the people of that age. How? Which people? The so-called Western people. Now what about the Eastern people, or the so-called the global South people? Africa, Asia, Latin America. Where are these people? This is European powers, Western powers. What about the Eastern powers, or the so-called the least developed countries or developing countries in this picture? They are not present. As a result, whatever the concepts that these persons have given, whatever the theories that we say today, either that is democracy, equality, justice, rights, this you have evolved it by looking at the so-called the life of the people of the West. If you look at the people of the East, these theories may not be applicable to the Eastern societies, because if you want to really develop a system like this called idealism, realism through the lenses of the West, if you observe this through the lenses of the East, particularly the Asian countries, the African countries, then they will have something which is different in the concept of power. They will have difference in the concept of democracy, equality, justice, rights. Their concepts will be different because the way in which these societies have been framed is different from the way in which the Western societies has been framed. Because the people of that time, where Western people used to think, that might not be the same as people in the East are thinking, right? But this is the reason why they say that Western political thought, or whatever the politics that we have today, whatever the political elements that are present, power, equality, democracy, this is all looked from the Western concept itself. Don't apply this to the Eastern concept. People of the East says, or the developing countries, are very critical about these fellows. Why they are critical? They say that you have developed these techniques by looking at your society, not at our society. For example, Asian people, there is a great debate of Asia. They say that your people's way of thinking is different, our Asian people way of thinking is different. Why that is different? Because the society, composition of society in the West is different from the composition of society of the East. If you look at the composition of the West, that is not a heterogeneous composition. They are homogeneous in its nature. There is one religion, the way of thinking of the people are similar. But when you come to the Asia, like India, if you go for East Asia, you have a heterogeneous mixture. Go for Africa, you have heterogeneous mixture. The way of people thinking is different. Hence, when the people are getting heterogeneous, or when your society is heterogeneous, the way of people thinking is also different. As a result, your principles, which has been developed by looking homogeneous picture, you have developed that may not apply to this. Hence, the concept called multiculturalism or the ancient debate has arisen. Multiculturalism. What is that multiculturalism? Don't apply your principles to us. We have our own principles. Hence, this debate called Asian debate started. And they are very critical. One criticism is this multiculturalist. The second criticism is post colonial world. These colonies are saying that you have developed the Western political thought, or thought by looking at your people but not the colonies over a period of time. Hence, they say that we will develop our own theories, we will develop our own concepts, uh, we'll develop our own concepts. That is called post colonial school of thought. Further, not only this, further, there were feminists who criticized that the thinkers who have seen this way of life, they have seen only in particular dimension called in the so-called men dimension. They have neglected women when they are seeing, or whenever you are seeing through that lens called scholars. These scholars themselves has focused on the men, and they relegated women to the background. As a result, the feminists started that don't use this lens, bring a separate lens called feminist lens. Hence, you might be understanding by this point of time how the schools emerged. Western political thought, the dominant school, has been criticized by the subdominant schools such as Asian value debates, multiculturalism, post colonial states, and the so called feminists. This is how they view the concept of state different, they view the concept of power, they view democracy, equality, justice, and rights very differently. That is the reason in comparative politics you have a syllabus called compare the state in developed countries and developing countries, compare the economies of developed countries and developing countries, compare globalization in the developed countries and developing countries. Why you have this difference? This is the difference, because the entire thing is there in the so-called the meaning of thought, right? Once you understand what thought is, you'll understand what is Western political thought and how that criticism is present for a period of time. First thing first, I want to know whether you are following it or not. చెప్పేది అర్థమవుతుందా?
Yes, sir.
ఏదేదో చెప్పుకుంటూ వెళ్తున్నాను అనిపిస్తుందా?
Yes, sir.
No. Why I said all this is, ఎందుకు చెప్పానంటే ఇంత, see, while writing the answers, you should have clarity about how the syllabus is framed, or you should have clarity about what exactly is criticism. ఎందుకు criticize చేస్తారు ఒక పొలిటికల్ థింకర్ని అంటే, they have studied the thought only through one particular lens. As a result, when they study through that particular lens, they are neglecting some other component. So they become criticized, or obviously it is prone to criticism. If you are using the same lens from the Eastern dimension, maybe democracy might have been a different name. Democracy is rule of the people, by the people, for the people. How you have come to that? Through this Western political thought. If you have studied that through the lens of the East, such as the Asian countries, like India, where you have multi-religion, right? Their democracy concept might have been different. Go for West Asia, where the religion is playing a very dominant role. For them, democracy might have been something different. So what these fellows say is, why are you imposing your values on us? Who are you to impose your values on us? In the name of democracy, you are saying that you want us to adjust to the democracy, but we can't adjust to democracy. Why we can't adjust? Our societies are not built in that framework. Your concept of democracy has been come out of the concept of West itself, not from the East. For example, take Afghanistan or Taliban's. What is the problem with the Afghanistans or Taliban's? Or what is the problem of West Asia? Why there is terrorism in the world? Terrorism is there. Why? They say that, the terrorists say that, who are you to say that this is the value? Democracy is the highest value. Who said democracy is the highest value? It is you, that is Western people who said. But in our societies, that is in the in the Eastern societies, we don't consider democracy as you consider, because the way in which our societies are framed, or our people used to think, the thought that it has developed in our people, it is different. As a result, stop seeing the Eastern world, stop seeing our societies through the lenses of the West. Your values are separate, our values are separate. As a result, don't try to impose democracy. As a result, democracy has failed in the West Asian countries. Why it has failed? Because the society itself is not adjusting to it. The way in which it has emerged, it is totally different. Hence, they say that don't impose the Western values on us. This is called multiculturalism. You cannot have these things in the so-called Eastern world, or the so-called Asian, African, or Latin American worlds, or West Asian worlds, because their composition is different. Hence, they say that don't impose these things on us. So, what I discussed is Western political thought. I said what is politics. In the discussion of politics, I said what is city states, police, city state, what is government, what is governance, how the things has evolved, and how governance structure has been dynamic from law and order, how it has become the so-called protection of the welfare of the people. Hence, minimum government, maximum governance. Not only government is present today because the needs of the people are changed, the governance has been increased in order to cater the increasing needs of the governance. There are new agencies in this. Not only government is there, non-governmental organizations such as self-help groups, women's organizations, NGOs, they have started playing a crucial role. But the difference between government and non-government is government has absolute powers, whereas non-government has limited powers. Legitimacy is not there. This is called politics, Western political thought. Now, what is thought? Thought is alochana, means understanding the age of the people, understanding the thinking of that particular period. How you understand, as you cannot go through each and every lens of history, there is certain people who have underscored or who has understood that, and they have framed their concepts. So by, it is an idea, thought is an idea of space and time, how people used to think in that space, how you people used to think in that time. How you will understand that? By going through the scholars. Now through the scholars of the West, who are these scholars? They are belonging to the West. As a result, Western political thought is this. So thought is the thinking of the people of the West through the lenses of the scholars of the West, right? This is for thinking. Politics means understanding the so-called governance. Politics, understand now the concept of state, the framework. This is called politics, right? Understanding this framework, the framework that you are seeing on the screen, through the lenses of the so-called the West, is called Western political thought. So this is the topic that we are going to discuss. So what is Western political thought? Understanding politics, understanding politics through the lenses of the scholars. Why to understand the lenses of the scholars? Because how people used to visualize this governance, or how people used to think about this governance at that period of time. This is called Western political thought. If you apply the same thing to the East, Eastern political thought will be there. As you are applying to India, that is called Indian political thought, which is quite different from the Western political thought, because this concept has a varied meaning in a different context. Is it clear? Did you understand what is Western political thought now? So now we'll take particular space, particular time, and then we'll take a scholar and we'll try to understand this concept. And this concept is through almost 9 thinkers. We'll start and we'll be discussing, starting with Plato, what he has said about the so-called government, what is governance. Aristotle, how he has framed the entire structure that you are seeing on the board. You'll try to understand the same thing from the so-called the lenses of Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, all the thinkers, how they have proposed what is the upper picture, what is the lower picture, and we'll try to understand exactly what is the requirement. But try to understand what is government, what is governance, because these things, unless and until you don't understand this, there will be lack of clarity in your understanding. Answers can be written, but clarity will not be there, right? What is state? State is an instrument through which it ensures that state is a state is an apparent body which cannot be visualized. It performs its functions through government, right? So what is government? What is governance? What is good governance? Now try to understand. Whenever I use government, it has something different context. Government means I am referring to the so-called green things on the board. Governance means the green. Oh, sorry. Government means the so-called red things on the board. Governance means the so-called green things on the board. Citizens means the so-called blue things on the board, right? Upper part, lower part, and the side part. Government, people, governance. So how they visualized, how Plato visualized this government, governance, people, how Aristotle visualized this government, governance, and people, how Hobbes visualized this. So this will be studied in the coming days, right? This is what I mean to say, or this is what for the day. What exactly do you mean by Western political thought and how it is present? So uh, you have 1 minute left. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, I will wind it up here and I'll state tomorrow how a particular thinker started seeing at this picture. Right? So we are going to discuss from tomorrow how each and every political thinker of the West has given this dimension. Right? I'll be discussing that. If you have any questions, you can ask me, or else I'll wind it up here. Tomorrow we'll join. Any question, girls? You have less than 1 minute. Quickly. Right then, if you do not have any questions, we'll be joining in 15 minutes for our next class, MCP program. Right? Shall I wind it up?